It's Monday and time for the Back to Business podcast, featuring Calgary's industry leaders. Welcome today's show host, Kim Hayden.
Today in studio, we're talking informed opinions with Shari Graydon. So stick tight. I guarantee this is a conversation that you are going to want to listen to. But first, our land acknowledgement.
In the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge that we live, work, and play on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Ga'aina, Piikani, the Tsuut'ina, the E'ahe Nakota Nations, the Métis Nation Region 3, and all people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of southern Alberta.
Alrighty, Shari, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
I'm excited to dive into all the topics around kind of equality, bridging the gender gap, because this is a really poignant time of year. Since March 8th is the International Women's Day, and really we now have a global light that comes back in and says, okay, how are we doing? Shari, how are we doing?
You know, in lots of ways, Canada is a wonderful place to live for women. We enjoy a really robust healthcare system. We are educated. We are graduating at greater numbers in university than our male colleagues. Women have equality rights enshrined in the Constitution. So very good story in Canada. What's not so good is the performance in senior levels of business, in the news media, in terms of who gets quoted and sourced as somebody who can comment with authority on everything. And in politics, we are 63rd in the world.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, most Canadians are very surprised to hear that because of all the other things that I said and the experience that we have as women living in this country. We imagine that we're a leader, and the truth is 5 dozen other countries are ahead of us.
Wow. You know what? Okay, so Shari, give us a bit of background as to who is Shari so that you guys know why this information is so relevant, so pertinent, and coming from a position of authority. Tell us, who is Shari?
So I'm a speaker, writer, advocate who has worked in and around media and communications for my whole career. And for the better part of 30 years, I've been involved with a nonprofit women's organization that was working to amplify women's voices in the news media and in public discourse. And the reason we do that is because the public conversations that we have really influence and affect policy and political agendas and what we pay attention to. And so when women's voices are not reflected in those public conversations, it changes what we pay attention to. It changes the policy ideas that we have, the programs that we implement. We all know this. Women are half the population. We deserve representation. Our life experiences are often qualitatively different than our male colleagues and partners and sons and fathers. And so the absence of our experience-informed insights in those conversations means that we're not actually doing as well as we could as a country, as a business, as a news organization. You're all going to benefit from a greater diversity of perspectives.
I had an interesting, and I know that there is no single answer. There's no single reason for this. I know that we have, disruption within our work timelines when we choose to have children. I know that there's lots of different things that go into this, but it was fascinating. I had a few years ago, I sat down with Elizabeth Vargas, and she has been in the news space in the United States for forever. She's on A&E now. But what I found fascinating, she said, the person she worked with, her male counterpart, is on his fourth 30-year-old, whereas she was phased out after, So there seems to be there's still this old kind of women under 45 are to be seen, right?
Yeah.
Do you still see that? Is that still part of the scenario? Are we not?
Sadly, it is. I mean, a year or so ago, Lisa Laflamme, prominent news anchor in Canada, was let go, and it was only the release of background correspondence where we learned that, her boss felt that there was a problem with the fact that she had let her hair grow silver during the pandemic. So yes, women are still held up to a higher standard, an unreasonable and unattainable appearance standard. Women invest more in plastic surgery and dyeing our hair because we know that we're going to get sidelined and marginalized much faster than the 60-year-old guy with graying temples who is seen to be wise and experienced. And, I think it's partly the media environment and the fact that we're so used to seeing women in Hollywood who are under 40 and have been photoshopped or surgeried into perfection. And so there's that disconnect, and we need to fight that.
We also have, on the flip side, young professional women who are afraid of getting pregnant, of having children, because if you're in the media space, there's some pretty nasty people. Like, when did we become a society where people could just say whatever they want to say? I was always told, don't throw stones, that's what I was told, to be polite. And I know somebody who went through this. So how do women navigate? And that's really what you're about, as being a voice for women and creating this. What are some ways that women can navigate these spaces that are not very friendly?
So Informed Opinions, our mandate is to amplify the voices of women and gender diverse people in Canadian public spaces. And, partly we need to change the systems. So yes, we deliver workshops for women. We do a lot of training to support women in understanding how to write an op-ed, how to write a commentary and submit it and get it published, how to be a thought leader, how to do a media interview and come out the other side without being brutalized or feeling like you didn't get what you wanted to say. We do workshops on persuasion and storytelling and all of those things. But we also do research and advocacy to encourage the systems that were pretty much by and large built by and for men to adapt those systems. And, what we know is journalists will tell you that if you approach a man and invite him to be interviewed on a subject that he's expert in, he will almost always say yes. And a woman is much more likely to decline because she holds herself up to a higher standard of authority. And she thinks that she must be the best person. Men don't go there.
No.
You ask a guy his opinion, and he thinks, well, yeah, I've worked in this field for 15 years. Sure, I'll tell you what I think. But women watched the 2016 U.S. election, and they saw a woman who was incredibly qualified get beaten by a man who didn't have half of her credentials, and she was criticized for how she looked and how she dressed and all these irrelevant things. So there are those things
how she dressed that is an interesting one, because we don't tend to walk around and mock men if they wore a suit that's like a decade out of the way.
No.
But, no, I totally agree that there is a different standard here, and I'm very cognizant of it myself, because at 54, I know how many years left that I have where I'm viable within the media marketing space in the visual medium, and it's not that my voice or my opinions or anything's going to get less. In fact, it'll probably get better the more people I speak to.
Yeah.
I read a study once, and you will probably know this far better than I am, that when it comes to putting a resume in, a male will put a resume in if he is like 60% or something like that, right? And then this probably goes back to women not wanting to speak unless they feel like they're 110.
Yeah.
But a woman will feel like she has to be at 90%. Do you know which study I'm talking about there?
Yeah,
there's so many of them.
There have been a few research initiatives that have looked at that, and they're backed up by other studies that find that if you take a resume and you put a man's name on one and a woman's name on the other and you send them out, the man will get exact same resume. John, Jennifer. There was an example of a research study done where they were applying for a research lab position at a university. The male candidate got exponentially more callbacks or interviews than the female candidate, exactly the same resume. So, there is unconscious bias that exists. Yeah. We still live in a world where many of us perceive unconsciously or consciously that expertise and authority comes in a male package. And that's a problem because, as I mentioned, women are graduating from university in greater numbers than men. And we have differently informed experience and perceptions. We default in some ways, partly because of the way that we're socialized. So, for example, if you look at financial markets, during the 2008 financial collapse, where globally this was a problem, research documents the fact that if there were more women higher up in the financial market system, we might not have had the same collapse. And that's because women take fewer risks. Men are socialized or inclined to take more risks for short-term gain. Women consider consequences and long-term gain or long-term pain. And as a result, stable financial markets are more likely to be achieved when we have women in more equal numbers to men. So that affects everybody. It's not like your company or my government. It's the world will be a better place when we overcome those unconscious biases.
That is actually, and when I stop and think about it, my husband has a company, I have a company, and he's like, well, why don't you just go out and do this? And it's like, because I have to generate the revenue to make that happen. He goes, well, just go do it. And, that makes a lot of sense. Do you think that is also part of the reason why we see fewer women in politics, is that we are less on the risk taking? I think having kids alone is risky enough. I love my children. But do you think that potentially is that risk avoidance is what's lending itself to not wanting or not stepping forward into political arenas or leadership spaces at higher levels?
It may be. I haven't seen research specifically looking at that. I want to go back, though, for a minute to what you said about women in business. One of the really interesting things that I think is related to the financial markets example is that small business, independent consultancies run by women tend to last longer because women tend to be more risk averse and they plan ahead and they're not as willing to make the big leap of faith. And as a result, they're able to sustain their business for longer. In the political arena, there are lots of deterrents for men and women to enter politics. You're going to get targeted. You're going to be...
It's not a very nice place.
And it's increasingly less nice.
Yeah.
But one of the interesting things to know is that when there are women in greater concentration, so women in the House of Commons today are 30.5%, 69% still men, 30% women. When you have more women, like Mexico has 50-50, Mexico, 50% women, because they rewrote their constitution, understanding that representation is fundamental to democracy. Women are half the population. They should have half the seats in the governing body. So they're 50-50. When you have more women present, there's less elbows up in the corners. There's less, the dialogue becomes more civil, more respectful, because women are socialized to think of others' feelings, to be more respectful. And that doesn't mean there aren't lots of examples of those who aren't. And I think our political discourse since the U.S. 2016 election has really deteriorated, and there's one person who we could blame for that.
Well, I think I would take it all the way back to Facebook to be I think that we've just lost a lot of basic manners, right? That and the acceptance of negative language derogatory language as being more mainstream. So I would agree, but I would take this all the way back. I'm gonna put this right at Mark Zuckerberg's feet. Right, I believe Facebook is actually, ground zero at some of this abhorrent behavior that we've seen.
You're so right. I think social media has really exacerbated it, and
it's brought a lot
Twitter,
of great
X
things.
has
However,
been, yeah.
it's there are some good things. It has given voice. It has brought people around the world together. Like we have advancements happening in Africa of people taking leadership and starting small businesses and such, that due to the global economy, due to the global voice, we have that. However, I'm still going to go back. My mother always told me, Kimberly Jo, if you don't have something nice to say, don't say it at all.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Again, most people just roll their eyes at me, huh? A Girl Scout all the way through. I want to talk real quickly in regards to, you have an event coming up. And for those of you who you hear this in a month or 2 months down the road and you weren't able to make this event, we'll make sure that we'll have all of her information in our show notes. But I do want to touch on the breakfast event you have coming up on February 27th and what that looks like, what the attendee can expect from that event, and how is this a type of event that you do on a more frequent basis? Like, where else can we find you?
So I was in Winnipeg a couple of weeks ago talking to the Chamber of Commerce there. I'm going to be in Toronto in a few weeks speaking at a couple of corporate events for RBC and Torrey's law firm. And really, the message that I deliver is research-informed, augmented by stories and humor, and I am really talking about the benefits to all Canadians when women's voices are present in greater number, are equally represented, what that means in a business context, in a research context, and then concrete strategies that men in companies who are leaders can implement in order to increase the likelihood of retaining the women that they go out of their way to find, keeping them happy and able to contribute, and strategies for women who want to speak up, who want to be heard, who want to contribute, whether that's in their organization or politically, and what are some of the strategies and things that we've learned through our research and 15 years worth of training to support women in speaking up, being heard, and gaining their rightful place.
Is part of the challenge from like the board level? Because I know that there is a definite discrepancy in boards. More men sit on boards, driving boards of companies. But is that also to do with maybe there's more women? Are there more women?
There are tons and tons and tons of women who are qualified to sit on boards, who have gone through board preparation programs. There are lots of qualified women. And the way boards have been recruited historically has been through social networks, like in-person social networks. I know these three guys, they're my friends, I'm going to invite them, I know they're good. So that's been a huge obstacle. But there are lots of qualified women for politics, for boards. In other countries around the world where governments have mandated quotas for boards, they have fixed that problem without difficulty. And interestingly, what the research shows is that although you say the Q word and immediately people think, oh no, quotas, we want the best people possible. Well, we're not getting the best people possible currently because people recruit their friends, people they know. And what happened in Norway when they implemented a quota system, people were concerned, and then when they went back and did research after the fact, they discovered that the performance of those boards improved. And that's because when women come to board meetings, this is a generalization, but when women come to board meetings, they know they're not welcome or that it's harder for them to establish credibility. They do their homework. They read the board package. They ask really thoughtful questions. They're not afraid to look stupid in front of their cohort of male colleagues. They ask the important questions, and the boards end up making more ethical decisions. They interrogate human resource dynamics differently because women pay attention more to those things. So the truth is that women are not better than men, but women and men together are better than only men or only women. I run a feminist organization. I have men on my board because I know that we will come up with better ideas and decisions if I'm benefiting from those perspectives.
I am so glad you said that, though, because I hear a lot of times where everybody is it's either they go to the extreme. They go to the extreme and they, no men, all men are bad, blah, blah, blah. And I'm a mother of 2 young men and I've been a wife for 30 years. And, I love working. I love doing what I'm doing. I've always been out front and center. But yeah, I think this is really not a them or us. I think it's a we.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the research is so clear that when you have men and women working together, you get better decision making. Companies are more profitable. They're better able to connect with their customers because their customers are men and women and everybody in between. And so it just doesn't make sense for any organization to be drawing on the talent pool, half the talent pool, and having only a few token people. And, it makes a difference to pretty much everything. Peace treaties last longer when women are involved in their negotiation because women's realities on the ground in the Sudan or Ukraine are different than men's.
Yeah, they're trying to just kind of keep the lights on, basically. They're trying to ensure everybody's fed, everybody's taken care of. They're just trying to make sure that logistically everybody is safe. And it's not. And we were talking about this when it comes to just men seem to be, this is just my personal experience. I have no degrees, folks. I may play one on TV at some point in time, but I am not a professional in this space. However, in my home, I have noticed that my boys tend to think very almost tunnel visioned at times, whereas my daughter tends to think on a broader, like she goes a bit wider when she's looking at the optics of situations. I
think there's research that documents that. And I think it's, again, partly a function of socialization that women do tend to think more broadly. They think about the impact on human beings. And the difference between those two are complementary. So if you have a company and some men are really heads down, focused in a narrow way and able to dive deeply, not to say that women aren't capable of doing that as well, but then if complementing that, you have women who are thinking bigger picture, they're imagining the holistic environment and how people over here and over here are affected, that's enormously valuable to have both of those.
Yeah, it's all about balance. That's what we have to bring back to the table. I think that's what really is. We were on such a good trajectory, and then, there's just been so many things that have come up, and everybody, it just seems that people keep pushing to create this chasm of communication that we keep shoving either you have to belong over here or you belong over here. And then we see these people, I don't know if you've seen this young woman, Pearl, on YouTube, has come up out of nowhere, and she says things like women shouldn't have the right to vote. And she's a young woman in this under 30, and it's like, you get this sensationalism, and it's like, I know she's probably honestly, in all reality, just trying to get as many, YouTube views as possible. But it doesn't help.
No.
It doesn't help. My daughter can't stand her. But, it is interesting how we have this real, almost like fight on our hands that I don't think we've ever seen before, this friction. And I just think we were getting so very close. And now we have all this friction going on. Things that are changing, though. I want to talk about the Governor General's Award. So we are putting recognition of women leaders like yourself. You have an award-winning book, now Governor General Award. Tell me what it took to get there and what that is for.
So the Governor General's Award in commemoration of the person's case is given to 6 women a year, Canadian women who have acted in a way that has furthered women's advancement in a variety of spaces. So sometimes they're academics. I've spent my life as a communicator and an advocate. And so when I was recognized, it was for the work similar work to what I'm doing currently. Really amplifying attention to the way women are represented and portrayed in media and why we need to fix that and why we all benefit when the world is experiencing the insights and perceptions and intelligence of women and of men. So that was 2007, so it was a few years ago now. But when I got it, I felt like I hadn't done enough, and I sort of
that's the female thing, though.
Yes,
like
it
was
is.
Yes.
Yes,
So,
it is.
We have a new program here at the club. Our YP program, our Young Professionals program, is launching. And one of the things that we're really working to bring to the forefront is helping our young professionals launch confidently forward to accelerate their careers. What's some advice you would give to a young professional female out there?
I would say to, first of all, really know and understand the value that you're bringing, that even though you may be entering male-dominated spaces and you may be surrounded by folks who don't have your life experience, to really understand that your differently informed perspective adds value. And even though you may feel imposter syndrome, to remember that the difference that you bring is actually an asset. And to know that because you grew up female, you may not have gotten the same memo that your twin brother got in very subtle ways his whole life. That is, that your opinion matters. I also think that, the world is full of really strong female role models now. We see in every discipline, in every field, in many, many countries around the world, we're seeing really strong, articulate, impactful, intelligent, competent women, and that's really helpful. We know that if you can't see her, you can't be her. Speaking of the Governor General, when Adrienne Clarkson was Governor General, she told a story about she would go into events and little Asian Canadian girls would rush her, and they would suddenly have wide eyes at the expanded vision they had of their own role and potential in Canada, because here was an Asian Canadian woman who was Governor General. I'm sure the same thing happened with Michaëlle Jean. And so seeing not just women, but diverse women in roles where they're exercising power and influence and demonstrating their competency is, I think, really helpful.
This is a conversation that we could probably sit here for an hour or more. There's so many opportunities in this world to make this such an amazing place when we all work together and we're considerate of each other. And I'm super grateful, Shari, that you are bringing this message to Calgary, to Canada, and you're just working diligently. It just thanks. There's not enough thanks.
Thank you. It's very, very rewarding work to work with women, to support them in amplifying their voices and contributing, and it's a pleasure to do it and to speak with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us today on the Back to Business podcast. Be sure to visit calpeteclub.com, CALPETECLUB.com, to find out more about upcoming events, networking opportunities, and membership. If you are not already a valued member at the CPC, where we are proudly connecting and supporting Calgary's business leaders.